AI tools are taking over. From image generators winning art awards to chatbots that can write your college essays for you. Companies are shoving it down our throats, and it's either we adapt or get left behind. So I'm choosing to adapt, but my question is, how useful are these AI tools right now in actually accomplishing real-life goals that I have? To answer that question, I challenged myself to learn Japanese using AI for 30 days. Here's a rundown of my 30-day journey, starting from day 0. After attending Japanese language school for 3 months earlier this year, my Japanese definitely improved rapidly, but as soon as it ended, I found myself unable to continue studying on my own. I tried to finish the textbook that we used during language school, but every time I opened the book, I just felt like it was too boring to actually do. I no longer had classmates to study with or teachers to ask questions to, and that's when I had a thought. Why learn in such a straightforward, almost pre-programmed way that school has drilled into me? How can we change the approach to make it something that's a bit more fun? And something that I remembered was that ChatGPT was pretty useful when I was in Japanese language school. That's the day I decided to start my Japanese learning using ChatGPT for at least 30 days. Week 1. Testing and doubts. I started off the challenge with a very open mind, but I quickly began to doubt. On day 1, I asked ChatGPT to test my level based around the famous JLPT, Japanese Language Proficiency Tests. ChatGPT ended up generating a very short multiple choice test that included some reading, vocab, and grammar. After completion, ChatGPT told me I was N3 level heading to N2. That was actually completely wrong because it was not my level. In language school, I was studying N5, the easiest level, and I ended school around the middle of N4. So I asked for another test and even told ChatGPT that I thought it was wrong about my level. But for the second test, it basically told me the same thing. Considering it can't assess my level correctly, it's not a great start. But afterwards, I asked ChatGPT for a weekly practice routine, and it spit out quite a messy schedule, so I changed weekly to daily for 1 hour, and it simplified it. This is what I got. But honestly, I feel like I kind of influenced ChatGPT to make it this way. It's very agreeable to whatever you want, regardless of what might be the optimized way of learning. So I actually asked it what it thinks is the best way to learn Japanese, and it basically spit out that you need to practice lots of listening, reading, grammar, kanji, vocab, and so on. Regarding the time intervals, I ended up not following them very much at all. My average normal study day would be 30 minutes of grammar and then 30 minutes of kanji, and during these sessions I learned vocab. For listening, I tried using ChatGPT's voice for it.
Nomu, zi o nomimasu, I drink water. Kaku, tegagi o kakimasu, a letter. Hono o yomimasu, I read a book.
Okay, yeah, that's terrible. That's so bad. So I ended up looking up some other things online for AI voices for Japanese, but there was nothing that I felt was quite there yet. There were some that were getting there, but not quite yet. So instead, I asked ChatGPT for podcasts to listen to, and I chose the first one on its list of recommendations, Nihongo kon Teppei. And honestly, it's become one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. Week 2, from vanilla to matcha chocolate. I spent 2 weeks doing the basic learning routine, asking ChatGPT for the kanji, grammar, or vocab of the day, and I just learned them based on examples and explanations that ChatGPT gave. It was solid learning, but a bit vanilla. Eventually, 3 things turned that vanilla into something more like matcha chocolate. The first is the discovery that I actually enjoy learning kanji. Interestingly, at first, during language school, I didn't care about learning kanji at all. Speaking and listening were my priorities instead. However, after spending more time and having ChatGPT explain onyomi and kunyomi patterns and radicals, I started to get more curious. It began feeling more like a puzzle that I had to figure out. A puzzle that ChatGPT was sometimes really bad at interpreting because it got certain radicals wrong. That's another reason why it's not like 100% there yet, but I supplemented my kanji practice using Wanikani. Wanikani is great at breaking down kanji composition and helping you with remembering radicals. I tried using it a long time ago as a beginner, like just learning on its path, but I found it way too boring to keep up with. Somehow, this chaotic wombo combo of ChatGPT and Wanikani's search function made it feel fun and stimulating. And also, my mindset was definitely holding me back. Letting go of the idea that I didn't care for kanji and actually trying my best to learn it changed basically everything. Apologize to my language school teachers for not trying at first. Anyways, the second pivotal change happened at around the midpoint of the challenge. During one of my study sessions with ChatGPT, I brought on my girlfriend, who happens to be a Japanese native speaker, and I asked her to critique ChatGPT's Japanese. She confirmed that its Japanese is overall pretty natural and good. It was just a few samples that we looked at, and she did have to make some corrections sometimes, but it's at least 80% of the way there. And I feel like that's good enough to learn and test out with real native speakers later that you trust to tell you if you sound unnatural. For me, that was huge, because at that point, I was sort of half-heartedly using ChatGPT and using external resources more, like Boon Pro for grammar, for instance. But knowing that I can trust it made me feel like actually testing out some new learning methods. And that is the third change. I started to take learning into my own hands. I threw away ChatGPT's practice schedule and decided to explore more interesting ways of learning. I quickly discovered that ChatGPT's teaching methods and how effective it is depends highly on your creativity. It's like creative learning. I started to ask ChatGPT to generate conversations between friends in casual Japanese, since one of the hardest things about Japanese is learning casual speech, since it's extremely different from textbook Japanese. After ChatGPT generates the conversation, I ask for a breakdown of that conversation, and then I study it, and then I practice speaking it. Another method I enjoyed was having ChatGPT generate stories based on JLPT N levels. I simply asked for a story that's suitable for me, and then tried my best to read it. Through this practice method, I was basically always able to learn new kanji, grammar, and vocab, which was the same stuff as before, just that this way was much more fun. I also tried using ChatGPT as a texting buddy, but found that my lack of kanji reading ability really made that hard, so not quite yet for that one. But I probably could have asked it to stick to JLPT N4 kanji to fix the issue. Over time, I definitely got better at how to word my learning requests as the challenge went on. It's pretty important to be creative and specific if you want a good experience learning from ChatGPT. However, a part of me does feel like I've barely scratched the surface of how I can use ChatGPT to learn. For instance, one of my goals for Japanese is to be able to watch anime without any subtitles at all. And I'm thinking that requesting it to break down an episode of, say, like One Piece or some of my favorite animes, and then studying that breakdown, that would be extremely fun. There's a ton of possibilities, and there's something truly satisfying about choosing what you want to learn, also choosing the way you want to learn it. ChatGPT and AI gives you that freedom. To close off the challenge, I asked ChatGPT to give me a final exam based on what we learned in the past 30 days. Unfortunately, ChatGPT gave me a different format of the test compared to the first one that I took. And it also really only remembered like most of the recent things we learned compared to like back then in the beginning. That was also partially my fault because I created multiple chats organizing things by how I learned, like kanji, grammar, and vocab. But it's also ChatGPT's fault for limiting the amount that I can interact with a single chat unless I pay for it. It also does get a bit stupider after a certain amount of usage as well. So yeah, limitations to note. Anyways, for the final test, ChatGPT basically told me that we had the same results. I was around that same level. I wasn't about to jump up like a whole N level after this curriculum for 30 days, but I did end it with a great amount of satisfaction. There's something seriously rewarding in just setting out to do a challenge and committing to it and then succeeding on that final day. But let's talk about some tips and key takeaways from this challenge. The first tip is actually unrelated to AI. In hindsight, I made a decision on day one that would shape the rest of the challenge for the better. That decision was to record my practice sessions and post them onto YouTube. So you can actually watch about 26 of my practice sessions. There's something quite magical about just putting yourself on film. It pressures you in a positive way to get focused, and it gives you a potential viewer to talk through ideas with. Thanks to the fact that I posted my practice sessions, other Japanese learners interacted with me. I would hear some pretty encouraging things, like people telling me that the way I used ChatGPT to learn was impressive, and near the end of the challenge, I also received a nice comment saying that they thought that I progressed in a very, very fast way. Some people also shared their personal ways of how they learned using ChatGPT, which I found helpful. Definitely very motivational and encouraging. But for this tip, you don't actually need to post it publicly. By just filming yourself, you have a solid library that you can point at, showing your progress, consistency, and your hard work. That alone is worth documenting the journey. Moving on to some more AI-related takeaways. Okay, the first huge takeaway is that I actually became consistent with studying Japanese on my own, thanks to AI enhancing the experience and making it more fun. I've never studied anything this consistently in my life. In school, school, I was the type of student that would fall asleep in class, procrastinate until the last minute, and then study on my own like right before the day of the test. Even during language school, I can count the number of times that I studied outside of class in one hand. So basically, AI has convinced me that it has the potential to completely change education and learning. I would say that my conclusion is that ChatGPT is at that level where it can teach you all the basics and act as your teacher already, and it can do so much more if you use it in the right way. Just be careful, because sometimes it still can make mistakes, so definitely verify it with someone that actually has the expertise you're trying to learn. The other takeaway is that I feel like I view learning differently now. School has really drilled into me this idea that learning should always be this structured, linear, almost classroom-like setting that feels restrictive and stale. That's one of the reasons why I found it so difficult to finish my Japanese textbook from school. Not because I hate structure, I actually prefer structure, but more so because it felt like I had no choice but to go through this sort of decided path. Otherwise, it meant I wasn't actually taking learning seriously or making any progress. But this challenge with ChatGPT and my time in Japan taught me something else. Learning can be spontaneous, adventurous, creative, and exciting. True, at times I felt like it was a bit chaotic, and that's why I would sometimes just do some grammar that was laid out for me with this nice linear structure. But if I did that all the time, I can see why people end up falling off their studies, because it can get pretty stale fast. If you're starting to feel that way about something you're learning, just remember you don't have to follow that rigid path, especially now with the advent of AI. And also, I'm curious, how are you guys using AI to satisfy your curiosity? Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can check out my other 30-day challenge of me fixing my extremely bad binging entertainment habit. Doing that challenge and learning from it definitely made a huge impact in my life, and maybe it can for you as well. Check it out.